I am Lutus a Borg. Resistance is futile. Your life as it has been is over. Star Trek The Next Generation turned a cancelled revival and a bare sound stage into one of the most ambitious science fiction series ever produced. Premiering in 1987, it launched the Federation's flagship Enterprise D into the 24th century under the command of Patrick Stewart's captain Jean-Luc Picard. Austere, brilliant, and Shakespearean in every molecule. Alongside him, Jonathan Frak's confident and perpetually leaning Commander Riker, Brent Spiner's endlessly questioning android Data, LeVar Burton's engineering visionary, Geordi LaForge, Marina Sirtis's empathic counselor, Dana Troy, Michael Dorn's honor-bound warrior, Worf, and Gates McFadden's formidable Dr. Beverly Crusher. Across 7 seasons and 178 episodes, The Next Generation didn't simply continue a franchise. It redefined what science fiction television could accomplish, ultimately spawning 4 feature films, multiple spin-offs, and a revival still running decades later. Yet behind the gleaming corridors and measured diplomatic deliberations was a saga of bruising casting battles, decade-old scripts pulled from a forgotten archive, ferocious behind-the-scenes power struggles, and a production that came far closer to collapse than anyone in the audience ever suspected. These are 15 remarkable facts about Star Trek: The Next Generation. Stick around for fact number 15 to see how one actress challenged the system, and ultimately changed the show for the better. Before we set coordinates for the 24th century, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the classic films and television that refuses to fade away. Number 1. The Captain Nobody Expected. The Next Generation's central character was not a unanimous decision. It was a battle. And it very nearly ended before it began. Gene Roddenberry's vision for the new Enterprise captain was clear. A commanding physical presence, undeniable screen authority, an heir to what William Shatner had established. What he did not envision was a bald English Shakespearean actor with a quiet cerebral intensity and the bearing of a man who had spent 30 years performing King Lear. When Patrick Stewart walked into his first meeting for the role, Roddenberry dismissed him almost immediately. But the team at Paramount wasn't ready to close that door. A compromise was attempted. Stewart was asked to wear a hairpiece for his final audition, a specific wig requested through his agent, which his then-wife, Sheila Falconer, FedExed from London to Los Angeles. Stewart performed one scene wearing it. Then the executives in the room asked to see him without it. The reaction that followed changed television history. John Pike, then president of Paramount Network Television, made the call: hire the Englishman. Lose the wig. Roddenberry remained skeptical. The fanbase, when the casting was announced publicly, erupted in protest. Letters arrived at the studio insisting the show was already finished before it began. It wasn't. Patrick Stewart became Jean-Luc Picard, one of the most indelible characters in science fiction history, and the hairpiece stayed in London where it belonged. Worf, which makes it all the more extraordinary that Worf was never part of the original plan. When Gene Roddenberry first outlined the series, he made a deliberate creative decision, a clean break from the 1960s original. His early series Bible banned familiar alien species entirely. No Vulcans, no Klingon, no Romulans, all new, all forward-looking, which meant by definition no Worf. As production approached, Roddenberry reconsidered. A Klingon in a Starfleet uniform standing on the bridge of the Enterprise carried enormous visual meaning. The Federation's most feared former enemy had become an ally. That single image told the audience exactly how far the galaxy had traveled in a century. So, Worf was added very late. So late that the character wasn't in the original casting breakdowns, and the bridge set had already been built. That's why throughout Season 1, Worf is almost always standing. He drifts between consoles, hovering near the back of the bridge because there was literally no seat designated for him when the set was constructed. The furniture was fixed. The stations were assigned. Then Michael Dorn came in to audition. He stayed in character the entire time, silent, completely still, projecting a quiet intensity that read even without a line of dialogue as a man who had fought in actual wars and wasn't particularly moved by this room. Roddenberry saw him and expanded the role immediately. Worf's importance escalated further when Denise Crosby, playing Chief of Security Tasha Yar, chose to leave the series late in Season 1. Her exit gave Worf a formal function, a permanent title, and eventually a real seat at the table. From a last-minute addition with nowhere to stand, Michael Dorn went on to log 281 episodes and 5 feature films across The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Picard, the most prolific actor in Star Trek history. Number 3. The script archive nobody talked about. A significant portion of the Next Generation's earliest stories didn't emerge from writer room brainstorming or visionary creative sessions. They came from a filing cabinet. In the late 1970s, Paramount developed a full television revival of the original Star Trek called Phase 2. Sets were constructed, a series Bible was drafted, scripts were written, actors were contracted, the production was remarkably far along. Then at the last moment, the project was redirected, becoming instead Star Trek the Motion Picture. The scripts, the ideas, the complete story frameworks were shelved, but they were never discarded. When The Next Generation launched nearly a decade later, producers went quietly back into those archives. The most visible example came during Season 2. The 1988 writer strike had halted fresh script development, and the production needed a premiere episode on an accelerated timeline. They returned to the Phase 2 files and found a story originally developed for Lieutenant Elia, a character who becomes impregnated by a mysterious alien force. For The Next Generation, they substituted Deanna Troi. The episode The Child aired as the Season 2 premiere. Same premise, different counselor. Devils do receive the same treatment. Originally a Phase 2 story where Captain Kirk confronts a woman claiming to be a genuine mythological devil. It was adapted into a TNG episode and reframed as an investigation of an elaborate con. Roddenberry didn't reinvent the wheel. He went back and found the one he'd already built. Number 4. A production built on borrowed parts. If the scripts came from an archive, the physical production came from something equally unglamorous. A very well-organized storage facility. To manage a television budget of genuine ambition without going into full crisis. The Next Generation became extraordinarily skilled at repurposing physical assets from the original series and the early films, sets, models, props, if it existed and could be reused. It was. The transporter room offers one of the most striking examples. The circular glass pads from the 1960s Enterprise, the ones Kirk and Spock stood on before beaming into any given crisis, were removed, inverted, and mounted directly into the ceiling of the Next Generation's transporter set. Those same lenses continued their tour of the franchise. They appeared on the Enterprise A in Star Trek V and VI before eventually retiring aboard Voyager. So, while the show presented itself as a bold leap into the future, it was quietly hauling the past along with it in every frame. Number 5. The theme that belonged to someone else. The opening theme of The Next Generation is one of the most recognizable pieces of music in science fiction television. It is also technically not an original composition for the series. The fanfare that opens the title sequence is lifted directly from Alexander Courage's theme for the original 1960s Star Trek. The main march that follows it belongs to Jerry Goldsmith, composed for Star Trek, the motion picture in 1979. What The Next Generation presented as its own musical signature was in practice a carefully assembled combination of existing material. There was an original theme ready. Series composer Dennis McCarthy had written a brand new opening specifically for the show, complete, polished, professional. At the last moment, producers set it aside in favor of the one we all remember. Number 6. The magic inside the machine. If the theme was borrowed and the props were repurposed, surely the visual effects were a showcase of cutting-edge technology. They weren't. The transporter effect, that shimmering organic dissolution that made Energize sound like actual science, was created without a single line of computer code. The effects team filled a glass canister with water, then added finely ground glitter, metallic confetti, or aluminum particles. When a more dynamic quality was called for, they dropped in Alka-Seltzer tablets to generate rising bubbles. The resulting mixture was stirred, blasted with high-intensity light against a black background, and filmed. The result was a shimmer that moved like something alive because it was genuinely organic, governed by water and light rather than any programming. Actors were filmed standing still on the transporter pad, then stepped out of frame. The empty set was filmed again. The glitter footage was layered over the sequence as they faded in or out of existence with added vertical streaks and glowing columns in post-production to give the effect its distinctive structure. The transporter effect didn't go fully digital until Voyager, by which point computer technology had finally caught up to what a jar of glitter and some antacid tablets had been achieving for years. Number 7. The first season, nobody revisits. Season 1 of The Next Generation was a mess, and the people who made it will tell you so. The problem started with Gene Roddenberry himself. He had a firm rule. The crew of the Enterprise could not fight with each other. No arguments, no tension, no drama between shipmates. In his mind, humans in the 24th century would be too evolved for that kind of thing. The idea was noble. The TV show was nearly unwatchable. Writers figured out the problem fast. Drama needs conflict. When every disagreement had to end in calm, polite agreement, stories had no teeth. Episodes felt less like space adventures and more like very expensive meetings.